Hey, y'all, I'm Carrie.
I'm Momo.
And this is Monstrous, where the stories are strange, the shadows run deep, and the tea is always a little dark. Listener discretion is advised. Monstrous covers true crime, violence, and other unsettling subject matter that may be difficult for some listeners. All right, here we are, another week. Another one down. Another one bites the dust. I couldn't resist. If you're new here, welcome. We're glad you're here. If you've been here before, then of course we're glad you're back. So we're not really going to do much updates today. I don't think we really have any updates anyway.
Except it's too freaking hot.
Yeah, there is that. But we're not going to have any business today because we have a case today that I'm sure many, if not everyone, is very familiar with. Today we're going to cover Natalee Holloway.
Okay.
I was waiting for a reaction. I'm like, did she hear me? Or...
Yeah, I heard you.
Okay, so if you're ready, we're going to get into it.
I'm ready whenever you are.
All right. Natalee Ann Holloway was born on October 21st, 1986 in Memphis, Tennessee. She was the first of two children born to David and Beth Holloway. Their family, which also included Natalee's younger brother, Matt, lived in Clinton, Mississippi until her parents' marriage had ended and they decided to part ways. After the breakup, Natalee's father, Dave, relocated to Jackson, Mississippi, and this was around 1995. Despite the end of their marriage, though, Dave and Beth had made every effort to maintain a cordial relationship for their children in order to, co-parent stably.
Right, and that's not easy to do.
No, especially not from a distance. By all accounts, they were highly successful at this. In 2000, Beth had remarried George, who was known affectionately as Jug Twitty, so that's what we'll be calling him. He was an Alabama businessman. This prompted them to move from Mississippi to Mountain Brook, Alabama. By this time, Natalee was 14 years old and most likely in the 8th grade. So this was difficult. She had spent her whole life in Mississippi. Now she's moving to Alabama. But according to accounts, Natalee adapted relatively well and pretty quick. She became very successful at her new school. She was a part of extracurricular activities. She was doing exceptionally well academically. And she was also pretty popular among her peers. From all accounts, everyone absolutely adored her. Her friend Frances Bird had told reporters, quote, "I've known Natalee since she moved here in 8th grade. Ever since she arrived, she's been the most intelligent of all our friends. She's truly a brilliant individual."
She was very smart from what I heard.
Yeah. Now, by high school, Natalee had already begun thinking about her future. She wanted to pursue medicine. Her cousin Thomas described her as embodying nearly every desirable trait that you could imagine. Someone who rarely got into trouble and seemed to have everything going for her. By her senior year, she was a straight-A student and at the top of her class.
Nice.
She did so well that she had earned a full scholarship to the University of Alabama.
Nice.
And that is not easy to do.
Shoot, no.
On top,
a full ride?
Right. On top of being top of her class and being a straight-A student, she was very involved in extracurriculars as well. She was on the Mountain Brook High School dance team. She participated in her church's Bible club. She had a part-time job at a health food store, and she volunteered whenever she could. By every outward measure, Natalee was thriving. So when she asked her mother to let her go on the annual Mountain Brook High School class trip to Aruba, it felt like a serious but understandable request. Every year, the graduating seniors took a trip to Aruba as a reward and celebration for their accomplishments.
I'm jealous.
Right? That's what I'm saying. Shit. Beth was hesitant at first, but she couldn't come up with a solid reason why she should tell Natalee no. She remembered Natalee's stepbrother, George, who was her stepson, going on this trip 2 years prior and the experience that he had. And she wanted Natalee to have that same opportunity, to have that experience and to be able to travel. Dave, Natalie's dad, though, was not completely comfortable with the idea. In his later memoir, he reflected on his concerns about Natalee traveling that far with such a large group of students and only a limited number of chaperones. Even so, he did ultimately support the trip, and he gave Natalee a $500 check in order to cover half the cost. While Natalee was away on the trip, Beth took the opportunity to plan a girls' weekend in Hot Springs. For a short time, it was just a normal family moment, the kind of ordinary break that happens when you think everything is fine and your daughter is off celebrating with her classmates. But that peace did not last.
You go, girl.
On Monday, May 30th, while Beth and her friends were driving back to Mountain Brook, her cell phone rang. On the other end was Jody, a woman Beth had met during the information sessions before Natalee had left for Aruba. Jody told Beth that the students had gathered in the hotel lobby that morning for departure so they could come home. But when the chaperones took attendance, Natalee was missing. Her roommates had already told the chaperones that she had never come back to the room the night before.
Well, why in the hell didn't they say something sooner?
I'm not sure. You have to remember, these are a bunch of teenagers. They probably, honestly, as a teenager, they probably thought, she was out late, partying, whatever you do when you're on a trip like this. Because, they're 17, 18-year-old high school seniors. They're not thinking the worst.
That's true.
So this was the moment that Beth knew something was wrong. Because Natalee was not a flake. She was not careless. She was not the type of girl who would miss her flight home and simply disappear into the noise of a busy travel day. Beth immediately wrote to her husband from the car and told him what had happened. She had asked him to arrange transportation to Aruba as quickly as possible. Now, at first, he tried to reason with it. Maybe Natalee had missed the flight. Maybe there was some innocent explanation. But Beth would not accept that. She knew her daughter. Natalee was never late for anything. She would not have just failed to show up without calling or leaving word with anyone. Now, he eventually relented and began to make calls. At the same time, Beth called her son Matt, which is Natalee's younger brother. He passed the news on to their father. Now, Dave soon realized that Beth and Jug were now booking their own private plane to head to Aruba themselves. So while all that was happening, Dave went online and found the hotel's number. He managed to reach one of the chaperones who had volunteered to stay behind just in case Natalee had returned. Maybe it was a case where she just lost track of time or overslept somewhere, something like that.
Well, anything's possible.
Exactly. Unfortunately, the chaperone did not have any new or additional information to tell him. The only thing they could say is that they would remain there if Natalee came back, but that was all that they could say. The only other thing that they had mentioned was that the group had received some help from the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. An agent who had happened to be on vacation in Aruba had made some calls to local police on the family's behalf. It was one of those details that suggested the family was already trying to pull together whatever outside help that they could find. Now, while Beth waited to hear back about travel arrangements, she called the FBI field office in Birmingham. Because it was a holiday weekend, the office was closed. She was left with nothing but the phone and the list of students who had been on the trip. So she began to call each one of them, one by one. So this part of the story matters because the picture of the final night did not come from one clean statement. It came together slowly, from multiple conversations, from different students remembering different details, from fragments that had been fit together piece by piece. Now, as Beth spoke to the students, the shape of the night began to emerge. To celebrate their last night on the island, the students had gone to Carlos and Charlie's, the same place Beth had heard about from a previous student who had come home from an earlier class trip. They stayed out late and they partied till a little after midnight. And as they were leaving, a few people saw Natalee get into a dark-colored Honda with a teenager who had become familiar to some of the students while they were on their trip. That teenager, Jug's nephew Thomas, had told Beth that this kid was named something like Joran or Joran Sloot. According to Thomas, he was a Dutch tourist staying at the same hotel. At the same time, he didn't seem dangerous to them. He seemed like just another young guy on the island, someone that the students had met during the trip. But by this time, Natalee was already missing. After a few hours, Jug had managed to secure a private flight. He and Beth made their way to Aruba. The plane landed a little after 11 that night, and they went straight to the Holiday Inn where the students had been staying. There, they were met by the remaining chaperone and the vacationing DEA agent who had continued to assist where he could. Beth wasted no time. After introduction, she went to the front desk and asked about the Dutch chief who had been seen with her daughter. The employee behind the desk immediately knew who she was talking about. "Oh, yes, Joran," this person said. "He gambles in the casino. He likes to prey on young female tourists, especially the blondes." For anyone that does not know, Natalee Holloway was blonde. The desk agent had also described Joran as tall, good looking, and reminiscent of a Dutch Marine. When Beth asked where he was from, she was told that he lived there in Aruba. Now, that distinction mattered because he wasn't just some random tourist passing through the island. He was known there. He knew the island and he knew how to move around it. And from the moment they arrived, Beth, Jug, and Dave Holloway felt the difference between how they expected this kind of situation to be handled and how it was actually being handled. Natalee's disappearance had been reported to local police. Hotel staff and casino workers were also aware of it. But no one seemed to be treating it with any kind of urgency. People were searching beaches, but they weren't police officers or trained search and rescue personnel. They were volunteers, and some were even hotel guests. Meanwhile, the family kept hearing the same comforting but useless line, "Just wait, she'll come back." But Beth and Dave did not believe that. Natalee had been missing nearly 24 hours, and the last person she had been seen with was someone they were now told preyed on young blonde tourists. They were not hearing a response that matched the seriousness of the situation. Now, when Dave arrived at the police station and asked to speak with someone about his daughter, he was directed to Detective Dennis Jacobs. After hearing Dave's story, Jacobs asked, "How much money do you have?" Which, why the fuck does that matter?
No.
I, I don't understand what that has to do with anything, sir. But, I don't know. Anyway, Dave, obviously, like myself, had no idea how to respond to this. So he just pushed past it and kept pressing for information about what the police were doing. But Jacob's attitude matched the same dismissive tone that Beth had already described to him. He suggested that Natalee had probably met a boy, gone off for a few days.
Nah.
Right. She was having fun and she would likely turn up, in a day or so. Then he told Dave and the others to go to Carlos and Charlie's and have a beer and relax because Natalee was most likely going to show up there anyway. Sir.
My child's missing. I'll tear the bar apart.
Right. Like, why are
sorry.
Why are you so lax about this, sir? Now, given the circumstances, it's completely understandable that Beth and Dave were panicked. They were confused and frustrated that nobody seemed to be taking their daughter's disappearance seriously. But it is also important to remember that locals later described the early days of the investigation very differently. So we got to tell both sides of this, okay? We can't just tell one, we got to give you both sides of it. And the family and the authorities would end up telling two very different stories about what happened at the beginning of this entire case. According to Gerald Dompig, the deputy police chief in charge of the case, pressure from the family sidetracked the investigation almost immediately. He then later said that the family's intensity created mistakes that damaged the case from the start.
Oh, bullshit.
He also described the way the investigation began as chaotic, saying they brought out their quote-unquote big guns on day one and started shooting too early. Okay, sir. Dompig and others later argued that the Holloways did not understand how the local system worked, which, okay, I could agree with that. It's a different country. Things are done differently. All right, so I could understand that they didn't completely understand how they operated. That makes sense. However, you can't dismiss how they're feeling.
No, you can't.
So while that is what they say, the family felt that the police were being cold and clinical instead of being compassionate. In their eyes, the response should have been more empathetic and more urgent than what it was. From the family's perspective, they were simply asking for help and not getting it. But from the police's perspective, they were just trying to do their jobs without letting panic and pressure take over the investigation. That divide would become one of the defining features of this entire case. Now, the next day, Beth and Jug reviewed the casino security footage on the gaming floor, looking for the boy Natalee had last been seen with. Using a more detailed description from Jug's nephew Thomas, they eventually spotted him on the tape and got a still printout to bring to the police. They had also learned where he lived on the island, which gave them their first real lead in all of this. That lead turned into a very tense moment. Beth and Jug convinced local police to go with them to the address, and Beth stayed in the car while an officer spoke to Joran's father, Paulus, I think is how you say it, Paulus Vander Sloot. Paulus said that his son was not home, so he called Joran, and Joran said that he was playing poker at the Wyndham Hotel. Police went there with Paulus, but Joran wasn't there. After more calls and more checking around, Joran said that he had come back home with a friend whom he believed to be Depek Kalpo. Beth again stayed in the car while the police questioned both boys standing in the driveway beside a dark silver Honda. And while she waited, Beth was on the speakerphone with some of the students from the trip, and they helped provide descriptions of both Joran and Depek. Now, Joran's account of what happened that night was deeply disturbing. He said, now I'm just going to be straight up front. This guy's so full of shit, okay? All right. So what he says is disturbing in every single way, but he's so fucking full of shit. I'm just going to be straight up honest with you. And as we get into what he says throughout this, you'll understand why I say that, because this guy's an idiot. Anyway, he said that he met Natalee at the blackjack table at Carlos and Charlie's. The way he described her stripped away any concern or humanity and made it sound like he was trying to reduce her to nothing more than a drunken, reckless stranger. He claimed that she came on to him. He described taking Jell-O shooters off her stomach and said that he gave her a shot of 151 proof rum.
That should kick your ass.
Yeah. He then said Natalee and his friends got into the car and headed toward the beach. He told officers that he and Natalee were making out in the back seat and that she was so drunk she kept falling asleep and waking up. So passing out and then coming back to. This version raised immediate questions, okay? If she was that intoxicated, then why was she taking anywhere except back to the hotel where she was safe? And if this was the situation, why did the story continue to shift from here? Because from here, Joran said that they then had consensual sex on the beach. Then he said that she was too drunk for them to continue. Sir, in no way is that consensual sex, okay? Let's just be real here. If you are so incapacitated because you're drinking, you've chosen to drink too much, that you are passing out and then coming to again, you are in no state to consent to having sex with anyone, but especially a complete stranger. Like, I don't understand in what world that's consensual sex.
Not in my world.
Like, this guy's a fucking idiot, okay? Like, he makes me want to throw punch him. Anyway, in the end, he claimed that he had took her back to the Holiday Inn, and that was the last time that he saw her, okay? Remember this story, all right? Now, according to Dave Holloway, local police seemed more willing to accept that explanation than to actually pick it apart, which it's not hard to do.
No, because he's full of shit.
All right. But the family and friends who came to look for Natalee had very good reason to be skeptical. Dave later said that Jacobs considered the boy's statement to be consistent. However, surveillance footage never showed Natalee returning to the Holiday Inn. So how is his statement consistent if the footage doesn't show her coming back when he said he took her back? The math's not mathing here.
Nope.
So this contradiction became one of the most important pieces of this whole thing. Now, of course, Beth and Jug were frustrated because the police seemed ready to settle on a story that didn't fit any of the evidence that was laid out in front of them. To them, Natalee had vanished after leaving the bar, and the hotel footage did not support the idea that she had returned safely. So, after getting nowhere with local police, Beth and Jug finally reached out to the FBI office in Birmingham on June 1st, because remember when she called on the 30th, it was a holiday weekend, so they were closed. So, on the 1st, they were back open for business. The office agreed to help however they could. Around that same time, Beth received a text from her son, Matt, that said, quote, "Mom, I called CNN. Now the whole world knows about Natalee." Now, Beth believed that he did this because he could see that nothing was happening. He heard the frustration in his mother and stepfather's voices, and he realized that public pressure might be the only way to force some kind of movement. Now, once the story reached major U.S. news outlets, tips started pouring in. And as we know, this kind of attention can either help an investigation or it can completely throw it off course. Now, people claim to have seen Natalee in different places around the island that night. Others said that she had been with known drug dealers, and the tips multiplied quickly. The family spent days following them up themselves. They were trying to chase every possibility because they believed that Natalee may have been kidnapped and possibly trafficked out of the country. At that point, very few people in Aruba seemed interested in helping the Holloways, much less in really investigating the case at all. Now, Beth eventually found two allies in Julia Renfro and Angela Munzenhofer. I think that's how you say that. These women were editors and reporters for Aruba Today. As mothers themselves, they were very sympathetic and they wanted to help however they could. They used the magazine to rally American tourists and ex-partes on the island in order to get them to, help search for Natalee. Now, after radio announcements and articles, over 100 American tourists, a handful of locals, and some police officers joined in on the search. That brought the attention of, I'm sorry, guys, some of these names are really hard, of John Vanderstraten. This was a Dutch police superintendent who had been assigned to this case. Now, Julia Renfro later recalled him telling her that she could not do it. And she then told him that she absolutely could, talking about, reporting about Natalee and getting people, rallied together to find her, basically, is what they were talking about. This guy insisted that Natalee had not been missing 48 hours and suggested that she go to ladies' night at Carlos and Charlie's because Natalee would probably end up showing up there. So because Natalee hadn't been missing 48 hours yet, he's like, there's no reason to panic. No big deal. Just go to ladies' night at Carlos and Charlie's, and she'll probably show up there. It's fine.
I really hate that.
What the fuck? Now, this kind of response baffled the family. Like, I'm baffled, okay? Sadly, this type of thing still happens today. I just want to be clear for everyone out there, okay? There is no such thing as a 48-hour rule that you have to wait to report anyone missing.
No, there's not.
That is not a real thing. Like, there are exigent circumstances, mental health issues, someone who is pregnant, someone who is disabled, a child under the age of 18, a senior citizen, any of those things, and honestly, there's probably more, they are to be searched for immediately. Like, guns blazing, search for immediately. There is no such fucking thing as a 24, 48, or even 72-hour waiting period for a police station to take a missing persons report. That's not a real fucking thing. They just don't want to do their jobs. Ugh. That shit pisses me off. Oh, God. Okay, anyway, sorry. Now, being told to go back to the last place that your loved one is seen and just wait for them to reappear is impossible to accept. Like, I'm sorry. I would probably punch you in the face if you told me to go to fucking ladies' night because that's most likely where my child is going to show up at. Sir, my child is missing. I'm not trying to go to a bar and have a fucking drink. Like, I'm going to punch you in, like, seriously. This type of stuff makes me so mad. Like,
oh, I know.
It's just so idiotic. It doesn't even how does this make sense to anyone? Now, at the same time, tensions between the family and local law enforcement kept rising. Gerald Domping later said that Jug and his Alabama friends threatened to bring hell to the island if Natalee was not found, even saying that they would burn it down. Yeah, I probably would too. Not gonna lie. Like,
That town would no longer cease to exist.
right, what else do you expect them to say? Like, it's easy to understand their anger, okay? And honestly, I would probably be the same exact way. You find my child, or I'm gonna burn this fucking place to the ground. Like, that doesn't mean I'm literally gonna do it.
Yes, I would.
But you get my point, though. Like, you have to understand how angry these people are. Their daughter is missing, and you're acting like she's just off having a good old time somewhere. When they're telling you this is not who she is, this isn't something she would do. And you're just like, go have a drink at Carlo's and Charlie's. It'll be fine. Fuck you, bro. But it is also easy to understand why local officials felt the situation was spiraling out of control. The combative tone became part of the story. It's very consistent. And then the media focused on the conflict as much as it did the disappearance itself. Media made this entire thing so much worse.
Oh, yeah. The media blows everything out of fucking proportion.
It was a lot of pitting the family against law enforcement is what a lot of it was. And it did not help. Now, by June 4th, 4 days after Natalee vanished, the local authorities finally began to reconsider their idea that she just simply walked away and would reappear. I hate these fucking names. John Vander Struyten eventually admitted that there was a possibility that a crime had been committed. Welcome aboard, sir. I'm glad you could join the rest of us. 4 days a little late, but welcome. You fucking jackass. Ugh. By this time, Natalee's disappearance had drawn enough attention that both the FBI and the U.S. State Department had become involved. And they're in a completely different country. A $50,000 reward had been gathered for information that would lead to Natalee's discovery, only 4 days in. The Aruba Coast Guard began searching waters and beaches while the police searched the island resorts and the urban areas. Despite all of that, Natalee was still missing. The case did take a turn, though, on June 8th, when local police arrested 2 local hotel workers, Nick John and Abram Jones, on suspicion of involvement in Natalee's disappearance.
Dang.
Now, at first glance, there was very little reason to suspect either men. The arrest seemed to come more from pressure to show progress rather than from any kind of physical evidence. Nevertheless, a judge ruled that there was enough probable cause to hold both men on possible murder and kidnapping charges. Now, those arrests were based largely on the boys' original statements. So, Joran and the Calpo brothers had claimed that they saw Natalee be approached by 2 dark-colored security guards as they drove away after they dropped her off at the hotel. Yeah. They tried to pin this entire thing on 2 random hotel employees, even though there was no evidence to support it at all. The surveillance footage showed Natalee leaving the hotel, but never returning.
Hello, 1 and 1 does not equal 4.
Right. So she didn't return. How in the hell did these 3 boys see her be approached by 2 hotel workers when security camera doesn't even show her come back to the hotel? Doesn't make any sense. Nonetheless, they arrested the hotel workers. So this was one of the most frustrating parts.
This is a shit show to begin with.
Yes, from the very beginning, it's like, I don't mean to laugh, but it's like just the idiocy of it. Like, she doesn't show up. So explain to me how these 2 hotel workers who were working that night had anything to do with it if she never even showed back up to the hotel.
Because they're stupid.
It doesn't make any sense. So this was one of the most frustrating parts of this case for the family. Beth had immediately contacted a lead investigator and told him that they had arrested the wrong people. So from the very beginning, her mother is like, you're wrong. These men had nothing to do with it. You've got the wrong people. She was unsatisfied with the response and turned to the press from there, accusing the Arubian government of obstructing the investigation in order to protect the prominent Sloot family. The suspicion of a cover up intensified because of who Joran was and who his family was. Because Joran wasn't some poor little boy off the street. He came from a pretty prominent family. His father, Paulus, had influence on the island, and the family's name carried weight in the ways that the Holloways did not quite understand at first. Beth's comments fueled speculation that the investigation was being handled differently because of that connection. So his dad, Paulus Sloot, he served as a high-ranking lawyer and a training judge there on the island. So, pretty prominent family and a very well-known last name. So the assumption that the government was trying to cover it up, it wasn't too far-fetched. It was, I'm not gonna lie. I could see how you could come to that conclusion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, in response, local investigators did eventually announce the arrest of Joran DePeck and Sadish Kalpo. So DePeck and Sadish, those are the Kalpo brothers. The lead investigator later admitted that under normal circumstances, they would have taken more time to monitor their suspects and gather more evidence before moving so quickly. But by that point, the case had already become a public pressure cooker. The police were being pushed from all sides, and the investigation was moving in an atmosphere that was no longer calm or methodical. Now, even with these arrests, the case still lacked the kind of physical evidence they needed in order to keep moving cleanly through the legal system. The suspects were under suspicion, but suspicion isn't enough. The police had stories that didn't line up, but they didn't have proof to match what they believed had happened. In an article for Vanity Fair, Brian Burrow pointed out the differences between Dutch and American criminal investigations. So Dutch investigations, generally, they don't speak publicly while the case is active. They don't release information, anything like that, until they're ready. They keep everything close to the vest. That approach most likely is why the Holloways felt that nothing was happening. Because even though investigators were insisting that they were working on the case behind the scenes, they weren't being told anything. So, from that perspective, it looks like you're doing nothing. While here in the U.S., families are given a lot of pretty regular updates. They're told as little, they're told as much as possible without revealing too much, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So the complete silence from Arubian officials, it felt extremely different and made it feel like nothing was happening, and I can understand that feeling. Now, the lead investigator later clarified that the investigation had always been focused on Joran and his friends. They simply did not want to reveal that too early because they believed that it would compromise the case. I don't know. Honestly, I feel like they're just trying to fucking save their faces, but, who am I to say? From their perspective, they were trying to protect the investigation. But from the Holloway's perspective, they were being shut out and left in the dark. Now, the interrogations and arrests did not clear Joran or the Kalpo brothers. In fact, Joran's story kept changing. In one version, he said the brothers dropped him and Natalee off near the local Marriott, and then they walked down to the beach to have sex. Later, he admitted that he realized Natalee was too drunk and just left her alone on the beach, saying that he then walked home and said that they never had sex at all. The Kalpo brothers backed up his story, but one of them made a very suspicious comment, suggesting that something bad had happened to Natalee, even implying that she may have been killed. So you got three people, and it's just all the dots aren't connecting. We're missing a few here.
A few? Well, damn page.
So this wasn't a confession, but it was enough to keep the suspicion on them alive. Now, a judge eventually ruled that the three young men could be held on suspicion of murder and capital kidnapping. But without evidence of a crime, authorities had no choice but to release them. The arrest had given the impression that progress was being made, but in reality, the case was stuck in place. because the judge is like, yeah, you can hold him on this suspicion, but they really didn't have any evidence of a crime. They didn't have a body. There was no proof that she had been kidnapped. She just vanished, which people don't fucking vanish into thin air, guys. Like, they go somewhere, but, to each their own, I guess. Now, with no solid leads, the family returned to searching the island. Investigators, including the FBI, followed every tip that came in, no matter how small. Then in July, 2 months after Natalee's disappearance, a man who had been dumping trash at a local landfill in the early hours of May 30th reported seeing several young men burying a body. He later said that they had left in a light-colored Jeep. An investigator later recounted that the witness had seen a face, blonde hair, and part of a woman's chest. But despite repeated searches of the landfill, nothing was ever found. That lead had raised hope, and then it crushed it, like so many other leads that came in this case. This family never got to bring their daughter home. Natalee had left on a celebratory trip, and they never saw her again. And to this day, they don't know what happened to her, her body, or where she ended up. Now, the landfill lead was only one of the many disappointments during the early part of the investigation. Other claims that Natalee had been dumped on a lake or left in various other locations also proved to be false. Still, one of the strongest leads that came was from a park ranger who discovered several blonde hairs on a large piece of duct tape. That discovery also gave the family hope. But when the evidence was sent to the FBI for testing, the results came back negative. That was one of the hardest parts of this case. Investigators had suspects that they believed were responsible, but without solid physical evidence, they couldn't do anything. Everyone knew that this story was not finished, but no one could prove what happened. Now, in the years that followed, the case increasingly lived in the media. There was very little evidence, and the story unfolded more on nightly news and talk shows than it did in the courtrooms. At one point, when it became clear authorities had no concrete evidence against Vandersloot, Beth visited the Vandersloot home and tried to speak with Joran's parents. Now, during a long meeting, she learned that Joran was a senior at the Dutch International School in Aruba and that he had been a very popular student athlete. Now, at first, his parents praised him, denied any kind of involvement in Natalee's disappearance, but Joran's mother had also admitted that while he was easy to raise as a child, he had become more difficult during his teenage years and had been recently seeing a psychiatrist.
That's almost scary.
Right. Now, Beth felt that they were hiding something. She pressed them harder and told Paulus Vandersloot that he was responsible for Aruba being trapped in hell. And she warned that unless he came forward, the country would remain trapped in a type of perpetual hell. According to Beth, Paulus began sweating so badly that the sweat pooled on the table. And Anita, Vandersloot's mom, had left to go get him a towel. At that moment, Beth believed that they knew something, or at the very least, they suspected that their son was capable of something far worse than what they were admitting to. Now, a few weeks later, Beth tried to get information from Depet Kalpo by visiting his workplace and demanding answers. That effort also failed. Then, in February of 2006, as the press searched desperately for new developments, Joran agreed to give interviews to major media outlets. During an interview with Chris Cuomo on ABC's Primetime, he claimed that he had met Natalee at the casino and intended to have sex with her after they left the bar. He said that they were originally planning to go to his house because that's where she wanted to go. But again, his story kept shifting. At one point, he implied that they had slept together. At another, he said that they had started, but they had to stop because he didn't have a condom. And he said that they never had sex at all. Pick a fucking storyline, bro. You're giving everybody fucking whiplash here. You shouldn't lie, okay? Let me just, don't do this, okay? Don't do what he did. And you shouldn't lie. Lying's bad. Shouldn't do that. It's not okay. But if you're gonna lie,
At least be good at it.
right, and stick to one story. You're all over the fucking map here. Just confess, turn yourself in, and just be done with it. I told you, this guy's an idiot. For so many different reasons. Now, the contradictions made the interviews hard to take seriously, obviously. He seemed less interested in explaining the truth than he was in controlling the narrative. Vandersloot also claimed that Natalee had been drinking, though he changed the amount and the importance of that drinking depending on which version of the story he told. In one version, she was so drunk that she was falling asleep and then waking back up. In another, he insisted that she wasn't really drunk
I'm
at all.
sorry, if you're that drunk, you ain't waking up. You're going to sleep it off.
Right, that's what I'm saying. In another one,
Been there, done that.
in another one, he insisted that she wasn't really drunk at all. It was as if he wanted to adjust the facts around whatever made him look best in that moment and who he was speaking to. And for the most part, he tried to use the interview to make himself seem remorseful and unfortunate, as if he were somehow the victim in all of this. So he was asked about his first encounter with Beth. He repeated her words back to the interviewer, saying that she had screamed, quote, "Tell me where my daughter is." He said that he told her he didn't know. He was then questioned about why he had lied when he was first questioned. He said that he was scared and ashamed. Scared of what? Ashamed of what? If you didn't do shit wrong, what are you scared and ashamed of? Like, he admitted that he did not want anyone to know that he had left Natalee at the beach. He said he was worried about how his girlfriend would react, how his father would see him, and how his friends would judge him. I think, I can't. The suspicion surrounding Joran had never really went away. And that's primarily because his story about that night kept changing. At different points, he seemed to confess to have had something to do with Natalee's disappearance, only to then later retract those statements. This pattern reached its peak in late March of 2010, when Joran, because we're jumping ahead. This was when Joran allegedly contacted Beth's lawyer and offered to reveal the location of Natalee's body and details about her death in exchange for $250,000.
Yeah, but if he's so off, why is he asking for the fucking money?
Right. He's just an ass.
He's a dick.
Yeah. The lawyer then traveled to Aruba to meet him and made a payment of $10,000, followed by a bank transfer of $15,000 to an account in the Netherlands. In return, Joran allegedly gave an address to a house where the body could supposedly be found, right? But when officials checked out the location, they discovered that the house hadn't even been built yet when Natalee disappeared. Yeah, she's just shaking her head. Interpol was notified, and when Joran was confronted with the evidence, he admitted that he had lied in an attempt to extort money from the family. By the time Interpol, got involved and all that good stuff, Joran was already incarcerated in Peru, and he was facing some pretty serious charges, much more than extortion charges, connected to a different case. Now, by the time this scheme unraveled, Joran Vandersloot was already imprisoned in Peru for a separate murder. She just side-eyed me. What was that look for?
Just blows my friggin' mind.
Yep. That case involved a woman named Stephanie Flores Ramirez. She was a 21-year-old business student in Lima, Peru. On May 30th, 2010, Vandersloot had met her at a casino, and the night moved from the casino to the Myra Flores Hotel Tac in Lima, where the two had went up to his room together. He murdered her there in his room, then robbed her of her casino winnings, credit cards, cash, and other belongings before fleeing the hotel. Reporters described her as having been beaten and stabbed, and some accounts said that she was found wrapped in a blanket lying face down on the floor. The timing of this made the case even more chilling, because Stephanie was killed on May 30th, 2010. Exactly 5 years to the day after Natalee Holloway disappeared.
2 years?
5 years to the day.
Jesus.
Mm-hmm. The details of that case only deepened the sense that Natalee's family had been dealing with someone dangerous for years, even while the world was still waiting for a clean answer to come out about Aruba. Peruvian police built an especially strong case against him. Hotel security footage shows Vandersloot and Flores entering the room together. An additional video showed him leaving alone hours later. Hotel staff confirmed the two had arrived together, and testimony from employees said that he told them not to disturb her, calling her, quote, my girl, and saying that he would return later. When police searched the room later and also searched his belongings, they found evidence tying him directly to the killing, including blood-stained clothing. Investigators also examined his laptop and rejected his claim that Flores had seen information about Natalee Holloway on it before he then killed her. So, in other words, the digital evidence did not support the story that he originally tried to tell. Police also tracked the victim's missing belongings and his flight out of Peru, which helped show that he was stealing while also escaping, not being framed, which is also another claim he tried to say. The accumulation of physical, digital, and witness evidence allowed Peruvian prosecutors to dismiss his later setup claims, which I'm going to get into those. Now, after killing her, Vandersloot crossed into Chile by land on May 31st, 2010. Hotel staff had discovered Stephanie's body in the room on June 2nd. And Peruvian authorities quickly reviewed the security footage and then began their international manhunt. On June 3rd, Chilean police stopped a taxi that Vandersloot was riding in near Vina del Mar, and they arrested him in Santiago. The next day, Chilean officials expelled him and handed him over to Peruvian authorities to face the murder charges for Stephanie. In the years that followed, Vandersloot kept changing his story about Stephanie's death. What a big fucking shocker there, right?
Imagine that.
And that was the part that made the Peru case specifically so disturbing. So first he claimed that Stephanie had seen information about Natalee Holloway on his laptop and confronted him over it. And it just pushed him into a rage. Later, he tried to walk that statement back by saying that he had been confused, pressured, or even misunderstood. And then at other moments implied that he had not meant to confess in the way that he did. Get the fuck out of my face, bro. You're a dumbass. Then she's sitting over there laughing at me. This stuff just makes me so mad. Like, this woman, had you just done your job the first time, okay? Arubian police. Had you done your job,
motherfucker would have already been in prison.
This
you could have killed that other woman.
Right. This woman would still be alive. Like, ugh.
I'm not going to Aruba.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Stay the hell away from there. Okay. Then, right? Then, he said that he had been tricked into confessing. He also claimed that the FBI and a man named Garcia had lured him to Peru, paid for his trip, and set him up in a scheme to get him extradited back to the U.S.
Huh? Whatever.
Like, I can't with this fucking guy. He gave another version to Chilean police as well, saying that armed robbers had been in the room and killed Stephanie. Like, I can't. Rather than settle on just one single story, he kept shifting blame every single time the previous explanation had completely collapsed. This case only reinforced the image that the Holloways had long believed was true. That the man they had suspected from the very beginning was not just evasive, but also capable of lethal violence. Now, in 2012, Vandersloot was sentenced to 28 years in Peru for Stephanie's murder. That conviction mattered because it meant that he was already behind bars when the Natalee extortion case finally caught up with him. For Natalee's family, the Peru conviction did not solve the disappearance, but it confirmed the broader pattern. Vandersloot had continued to lie, manipulate, and shift his story for years. He had been tied to one unsolved disappearance and now one solved murder. And that combination kept the case alive in the public imagination long after the search on the island had ended. Then, 3 years ago, in 2023, Vandersloot was brought here to the U.S. to face charges connected to the extortion scheme against Beth Holloway. Federal prosecutors said that he had tried to obtain money by promising to reveal what happened to Natalee and where her remains could be found. To this, he pled guilty to extortion and wire fraud. During these proceedings, he had also admitted that he had in fact killed Natalee Holloway. That admission landed with enormous emotional weight because it was the first time the suspect at the center of the case had plainly acknowledged his responsibility. But even then, there was still no recovery. There was no body brought home, no final resting place, no way to restore what had been lost in Aruba all those years earlier. Now, this happened because of a plea deal that he took.
Figures. A coward.
Yep. This plea deal did not bring complete closure. It brought a form of accountability, sure, but it didn't bring the kind of closure that most families imagine when they think of justice. The hardest part was that Natalee remained missing even after the confession. Her remains were not found, and the family was left with the truth that they had long suspected but never wanted to confirm. Beth Holloway described the moment as a kind of ending, but not a happy one. The man she had been chasing for answers for nearly 2 decades was no longer just a suspect. He was the killer, and he had finally said so. But the emotional cost of the case did not disappear with that admission. Natalee had left for Aruba as a bright, promising high school graduate, celebrating the end of one chapter of her life, and she never got to come home. The disappearance affected not only her immediate family, but everyone who followed the case for years, because it became a story about grief, pressure, media attention, and the long, punishing wait for truth. And even now, with the confession on record, the question that matters most still has no answer. Where is Natalee Holloway? For Natalee's family, that 2023 confession brought something that they had spent nearly 2 decades chasing: confirmation. Beth said that after all the years of confusion, lies, and dead ends, she finally knew what happened to her daughter in Aruba. But even then, the answer did not give her the one thing she wanted most.
Her daughter.
Right? Natalee still wasn't home. That is what makes this case so devastating. It's not only that a young woman vanished while celebrating one of the biggest milestones of her life, it is also that the people closest to her spent years fighting through conflicting stories, failed searches, public suspicion, legal dead ends, and a media circus just to get to the truth. And even after that truth finally came, the most important part was still missing. The story of Natalee Holloway became bigger than just one single disappearance. It became about the pressure on a family that refused to let the case disappear, about the gap between how the family expected a missing persons case to be handled and how the early investigation in Aruba actually unfolded. It became about the way a suspect could shift his story over and over again, benefiting from confusion and silence while a family waited for answers. By the time Joran Sloot pled guilty in 2023 to extortion and wire fraud, the Holloways had already lived through years of false hope. The plea deal forced him to admit that he killed Natalee and disposed of her remains, but that admission did not bring closure in the way that most people would imagine. He would do no time for Natalee's murder. Her body was never recovered, and the investigation still remains open enough that authorities said that they would continue to follow serious leads. Now, I don't know what that would consist of, because the plea deal that he got for the extortion charges, right,
Mm-hmm.
was to acknowledge what happened to Natalee, what he did to her. That's why he confessed. But the Arubian authorities said that they're still keeping the case open and investigating. So I don't know if that means that they're possibly looking to investigate to maybe charge him with something similar to like what we have here in the US. Oh,
Mine's smart girl.
disposing of human remains.
Okay.
Or, something like that. Or possibly charging the Calpo brothers or anyone else may be involved. I'm not sure if, because that plea deal was here in the US, does that mean that Aruba can still charge him?
I don't know, Clinton.
Like, does it cross over internationally? I'm not sure. So I'm not sure what exactly that would look like, but the Arubian authorities have said that they're not closing the case. They're still investigating it. So we'll see what happens with that. Okay. Beth Holloway's response captured the emotional reality of the case better than any timeline ever could. She said that for her, the mystery was solved, but it did not mean that the pain was gone. Joran Sloot was no longer just the prime suspect. He was the killer. Even so, the family was left with the truth that arrived far too late and with none of the physical peace that comes with bringing a loved one home. And that's the part that lingers. Natalee left on a graduation trip with her classmates, full of promise and possibility, and she never returned. And the years that followed showed just how long a family can keep searching when the answers keep shifting. The evidence keeps failing, and the person at the center of it all keeps changing his story. Natalee Holloway's disappearance remains one of the most haunting true crime cases of the last several decades because it never gave her family a clean ending. There was no
No.
there was no recovery, no return, and no final resting place that they could visit. There was only a confession, the confirmation of what they feared, and the permanent absence of their daughter that they lost in Aruba. So even now, the story ends the same exact way it began, with questions that never really stop echoing. And that's Natalee Holloway's case.
That's crazy.
Yep.
That's just, wow.
Yep. Like I understand wanting to get closure for the family and them know what happened to their daughter, and I'm sure that they agreed to the plea deal. But just for a DA to go to a family and say, "Okay, we got these extortion charges. How about we offer him a plea of, he pleads guilty to this, and if he tells us what happened, we won't charge him with her murder."
No, I'm
Like, I would love to know what was going through that DA's head when he cooked up
apparently nothing.
that deal. Because I don't feel like one equals the other. Like, I get wanting, the family to be able to know and, have some sort of closure, what there may be.
Right.
And, of course, I'm sure the family agreed to that and all of that. But it's like, why would you even take that to them? Like, I don't understand that. But then again, it's not something that we'll ever understand. It's kind of, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yep. That's it. And it's crazy to think that it just ended 3 years ago. Almost 20 years. Gotta find it 'cause I got it in my phone.
You know what?
I gotta find it because it's in my phone.
Find what?
Do you wanna know what we're doing next week?
What?
It's not any lighter. I'm gonna let you know that right now.
You need to find a lighter one so we can have Daxi in.
Yeah, I know. He wants to come on it. I gotta do some looking and see what I can figure out. Okay. Well, this one's not any lighter, so we'll probably do one with him, like, as a bonus. Yeah. Are you ready?
But
So next week, we're gonna begin a story that is bigger than one name, bigger than one town, and far more horrifying than anyone could have imagined at the start of it. So over the course of the next 4 weeks, we're gonna follow a trail of fear, disappearance, false leads, and mounting dread as investigators realize they are not chasing an ordinary predator. They're chasing someone who is able to vanish into the noise for years, leaving behind devastated families, unanswered questions, and a growing list of women who never made it home. This is the kind of case that changes everything once you understand the scope of it. Because at first, it looks like scattered tragedy, random loss, separate heartbreaks. But as the pieces start to connect, a much darker picture comes into focus. One built on secrecy, obsession, and the kind of violence that hides in plain sight until it's already done irreversible damage. We'll be going in deep into the investigation, the missing persons, the pressure on law enforcement, and the chilling pattern that emerged only after years of pain and persistence. And once we start connecting those dots, you'll understand why this case still leaves such a cold feeling behind. So next week, stay with us. We got 4 weeks of it because this is where the story starts to get harder to ignore and much harder to forget.
that don't tell me squat.
Nope. I
How
have to see if you
rude.
can figure it out before then. I have to see if anybody can.
You're mean.
You have to comment your guesses, guys. In 4 weeks is going to be a 4-parter, at least 4 parts. Yep, we're going to kick it off next week. Mm-hmm. That'll narrow it down a little bit. The big one, obviously. And it's one from here in the U.S. I know that probably doesn't help either.
No, it did not.
Yep, that's all we got today, guys. With a heavy Natalee Holloway this week. And then
Crazy, crazy, crazy.
we got our big one next week. Yep. That's all we got. You got anything?
No,
All right.
I hit the wrong button.
Oh. Ready to go eat some burgers?
Yes, I'm getting hungry.
Okay. All right. Guys, thanks for coming and hanging out with us. Make sure you come back next week for the start of our 4-parter. Yep. Once everybody sees the name of the episode, you're going to be like, oh, yeah. Yep. For next week. Because I showed up for that one. Yep. We're going deep into the trenches. Yep.
She just likes to show off.
Okay. Guys, you can find our socials linked in the episode description as always. Our email is also going to be there for your case suggestions, listener tales. Send those over to us. I read all of them. You can also comment on our Facebook, our TikTok videos, or even our YouTube if you have anything that you would like read or case suggestions. You can send all of those. Any of those places will be fine. I look at all of it every day. So please give us a rating and a review as well. I know they seem like a big hassle, but I promise they're not. You give a rating, you give a review, the algorithm does its thing, and new people find us. So we really appreciate when you guys do that. While you're there, also make sure you hit the subscribe button. Turn your downloads on so you don't miss our episodes. And with that, make sure you remember to
watch out for monsters.
Don't kill people, and we'll catch y'all next time. Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.
Bye. This episode is sponsored by Invisaware, discreet safety jewelry and accessories that can instantly alert your trusted contact and share your location with just a click. No subscriptions, no hassle, just added peace of mind. Get 10% off your order at invisaware.com/monstrous10.